Francesca Orlando is a science-based functional and integrative nutritionist and certified health and wellness coach, strongly emphasizing evidence-based practices. Hailing from Italy, she deeply appreciates the impact of research and scientific advancements on nutrition. As a board member of the Holistic Nutrition Credentialing Board and a certified health and wellness coach, Francesca combines scientific research with the holistic health principles. Her approach addresses root causes and considers the interconnectedness of body systems, epitomizing overall well-being. Good morning, Francesca. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
We are excited. We have had several episodes where we have touched on nutrition, but never took a deep dive into it. So we are very excited to have you on this morning.
Wonderful. I'm ready to get started.
Let's start with the brain-gut connection. I know that a lot of our listeners have heard about this, but may not fully understand it. And I think it would be a great place to start the foundation of our conversation.
Yeah, I feel like in Western medicine, we are used to consider the body as a collection of pieces, of parts that are, that form the human being. And the gut-brain connection is nothing new. I mean, the science is at least 20 years old, but there is an amazing, intricate network that involves the central nervous system, the gastrointestinal tracts, enteric nervous system, and the gut microbiome. It's a bi-directional communication network that plays a critical, fundamental role in mental health for both adults and children. And it works in several ways. For example, we have the vagus nerve that goes from the brainstem to the abdomen, and it's in a significant pathway of the gut-brain axis, which allows the gut and the brain to communicate directly through signals that travel along this nerve and influence all sorts of aspects of neurological function. And then we have, the neurotransmitters produced in the gut, which is also called the second brain, which play, a role not only in digestion, but also mood regulation. Think about serotonin, which is produced in extremely large quantities in the gut, in a healthy gut, I would have to say. And then also we have the microbiome, and we now know through research studies that changes in the microbiome influence the production of those neurotransmitters as well as hormones. So there's all those things that come into place when we discuss, the connection between the brain and the gut. And it is important to understand that the health of the microbiome is crucial in the development and the maintenance of optimal brain function and other things like the immune system. We need to remember that we have more bacteria inhabiting our body than we have cells in our body.
Wow.
So the health of the bacteria within us is as important, if not even more important as important as the health of our cells.
Yeah. Can you take a moment and explain for those who don't know what the gut microbiome is?
Yes, it's a pool of bacteria that lives in our digestive tract that is settled in utero. So this is so interesting because up until like a decade ago, we used to think that the uterus was sterile, the placenta was sterile, and the baby would swallow the first mouthful of bacteria during birth through the vaginal canal, and that's how the gut got inoculated. We now know that actually the uterus, the placenta, is not totally sterile, and there is some cross communication between, bacteria of the mother and the fetus in utero. But it is true that the majority of bacteria that will inoculate a baby's gut happens through a vaginal birth. So we see a lot of issues with babies that are born C-section, so much so that right now, when a woman has a scheduled C-section, they do what's called a swab. So they will get a vaginal swab of her microbiome, vaginal bacteria, and then they will, put it on the baby. It's usually a
Wow.
gauze. Yes, so that initial inoculation can happen. And then another way that we do inoculate a baby with our own bacteria is by breastfeeding, because we have bacteria living on our skin, not just our gut or our vaginal canal or our throat or mouth, but also on our skin. So through breastfeeding, that's another way that a baby gets a mouthful of bacteria from mom. So it's extremely important. I mean, C-section save lives,
Right.
and I'm not in any, shape or form saying you shouldn't get a C-section when it's needed or when it's wanted by the woman. But there are things that we can do to offset, the microbiome imbalances that a baby can have when they're born through a cesarean section procedure.
So is that to say the gut microbiome is the bacteria that you would naturally have or need? Or is it more than that?
Well, it all depends on the health of mom's microbiome, right? So we absolutely need bacteria to survive. We need bacteria to help us digest food. We need bacteria to support the immune system. We need bacteria to create nutrients like vitamin K and B vitamins in the gut. We need bacteria to keep the lining of the intestines healthy. But the quality of our microbiome, the health of our microbiome is only, it's dictated by what we inherit at birth and also by our lifestyle, because foods affect microbiome, medication affect microbiome. Everybody knows that if they are to do a round of antibiotics, they need to take probiotics and beneficial yeast to help offset that gut issue that you can get through antibiotic. Other things that change the microbiome are, hormones like birth control pill. A lot of other medications alter the microbiome. And then, of course, a diet. We need to bring in foods that feed the bacteria. Those are called prebiotic foods. So we're talking about our onions, our garlic, asparagus, bananas. Those are
bananas. I didn't even know that.
Yes, especially less ripe bananas. They have a good starch, that resistant starch that feeds bacteria. And then we need to bring in probiotic foods. So fermented foods, yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, kimchi. Those are all great foods to keep our gut healthy. I actually was working yesterday with a client who was put on an incredibly taxing round of 3 different probiotics for an ulcer in his stomach. And I was telling him, when you do take your big guns probiotics, as you start replenishing, try taking them with probiotic foods, because the synergy between the probiotic capsule and the probiotics naturally occurring in the sauerkraut or the yogurt will help those good bacteria survive in the gut. And then we have different types of bacteria too. We have commensals, we have residents, we have pathogenic, we have neutral.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's a very complicated topic.
Can I take us back to the microbiomes, I guess, that we transmit to our child during birth or while they're in the womb, right? So I would imagine, I mean, this is stupid, but of course, that what we're eating is so vital to making sure that our baby is being born with a balanced microbiome.
Yes, because what we eat affects our microbiome, and the baby will inherit our own microbiome. So it's you're protecting the mother and the child. Then also what the mother eats will affect the child's epigenetic expression. That's another topic that we might want to, dive on. I know we need 10 podcasts.
Guilt is right behind my left shoulder right now.
Well,
so much
the amazing thing about epigenetic influences is that, we're all born with our DNA, right? And then epigenetics is the way the environment dictates whether a gene gets expressed, turned off, or turned on, right? So you know that the way you eat, what you eat, the way you live your life, so stress management, sleep, water, all of it will affect epigenetic expression. That should empower you not to feel guilty, even though us as mother, we are innately, we are born with the guilt gene, so to speak. But also there's so much that you can do now to turn those genes back off or on, so it's not a life sentence. It's not a death sentence.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because whatever was done that was not optimal can be corrected.
Yeah. Okay, so going back to the gut microbiome and balancing bacteria, what else is in there that we're working with besides bacteria?
There's yeast in the gut, so there's
That's not bacteria?
No, it's a different type of microorganisms.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we have yeast, bacteria, there's prions, there's all sorts of different things. So when you probably heard of Candida.
Exactly.
Candida is a type of yeast that we need in small healthy colonies in our gut, but when it takes over, when it overgrowths, creates problem, right? So one of the jobs of Candida, for example, is that it latches on to heavy metals. But of course, we want small, healthy colonies. It's the same thing with H. pylori, which is actually a bacteria that inhabits the stomach. We need small, healthy colonies of H. pylori to keep the stomach healthy. But, when we overgrow H. pylori, that's when we get ulcerations, inflammation, higher incidence of higher risk of developing stomach cancer. But also, if our stomach is totally void of H. pylori, we have a higher incidence of stomach cancer. So that tells you that if there's something that in nature or in biology we're born with or inhabits a healthy person, it means that it has a function. The same thing, way back when they were like, oh, the appendix is something we don't need anymore. So if someone gets an infection, instead of trying to treat the infection, they'll just go in and remove it. We now know that the appendix plays a critical role in the health of the microbiome.
I didn't know that.
Wow.
Now we do.
Now you do. So, people like me, I had my appendix removed when I was 19. I'm always careful about the health of my gut, because I know that if I'm stressed or if I'm traveling, not eating optimally, my gut is a little weaker because I'm missing that organ of regulation.
Oh, wow. So the appendix was regulating the balance.
It has function, yes, for a different podcast, but it does have functions in the gut microbiome and in the gut function. Yeah. So, the nature is amazing. The body is amazing, and I believe that there's nothing in the body that's superfluous.
We have no extra parts.
That is exactly, absolutely.
Wow.
So you're a parent, a new parent, freaked out about everything, anyways. What is a basis for a diet that supports a healthy gut microbiome?
Variety. Different foods feed different bacteria. So definitely one issue I see a lot with my pediatric clients is picky eating habits, or children will eat 5 foods. So variety is amazing for microbiome health. We're talking about a variety of healthy foods. We're talking about fruits, vegetables, whole grains, lean protein, healthy fats. We do need omega-3 fatty acids for gut integrity, and also for brain development. So, fatty fish, egg yolks, and of course, this starts in the prenatal portion of making a baby. So, expectant mothers are always encouraged to consume a high DHA EPA supplement to make sure that those bases are covered. And then, going back to children, foods that are high in prebiotics and probiotics. So, we mentioned the garlic, the onions, bananas, asparagus, which are prebiotic foods. Apples, they have pectin that feeds the bacteria as well. And then we need probiotics. So yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, kimchi, to foster a diverse and balanced microbiome. And then, of course, we want to reduce those foods that actually create imbalance in the gut. So processed foods, sugary foods, processed grains, those all feed the bad kind of bacteria, the ones that we don't want in excess. And also, when we limit processed foods and sugary foods, we also reduce inflammation, which helps immensely with those connection between the gut and the brain. Then we need high quality protein to foster the production of neurotransmitters and hormones, peptide based hormones. So, it's important that we get enough protein to support that as well, because neurotransmitters are made out of amino acids and other compounds. And so are the peptide based hormones. Hormones can be made out of protein, so peptides, or they can be made out of fats. And so we need, a balance of macronutrients to foster that process.
I think what you said just kind of stuck with me is a variety of healthy foods. Variety of healthy foods is really like, if you're summing it up and you don't want to get overwhelmed, because I know when I was a young parent, there was so much information that sometimes you can actually shut down a little bit.
Totally.
But the variety is the biggest piece of it. And if you have a picky eater, my goodness, I mean, what do you do?
It's so frustrating. Yeah.
Did you have one?
Yes. My almost 10-year-old, he eats everything from curried goat to, you name it. That child is amazing. That child is every chef's dream. Take that kid at a restaurant and wow,
it sounds expensive.
I was gonna say it's expensive, but it gives me such satisfaction. He loves duck. He will try anything. He's such an adventurous kid. And in fact, the last 3 years, part of the summer camps that we do with him is he wants to do cooking camp. So we go to Sur La Table, and it's like, oh my goodness, that child is amazing. My 6-year-old, definitely harder, and definitely not adventurous at all. But you still try and you still present the foods that you want them to try. Then there's feeding therapy. So if we have a very radical situations in which a child is absolutely lacking nutrients that are needed for development, period. And then they can do OT, they can go do an OT and do feeding therapy, and you start just playing with the food. It's a whole process.
We did that.
Yeah,
we did that.
Food,
it was
smelling the food.
Yes, kissing the food.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Licking it.
Did it work?
You can bite it. You can spit it out. No food is bad or good.
Yeah.
But it's
I don't know if
salty,
it worked.
crunchy, vibrant. It's yellow. There are all those adjectives that you want to use to foster curiosity, but never yucky, bad. Never use negative connotation. I'm not a fan of hiding foods in foods, but sometimes it's needed.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just need to, add puree, disguise.
I think the kids that are picky.
Yeah.
And I always hear people say, you just keep trying and eventually they're going to eat if they're hungry.
No.
That didn't work in our house.
No.
It really didn't work with my
They're
daughter.
not
My
dogs.
boys have always
They're cats.
eaten everything. But yeah, my daughter went through that feeding therapy and I don't know how well that worked. But now, as an adult, she eats everything. And what has worked more than anything is if she's in a peer group now as an adult and people are eating all these things, then that's when she's tried the most foods. That's peer pressure used for good. But yeah, so stubborn, very stubborn.
And
she's choosing.
Depending on the age, we also get into control issues with food.
True,
when I work with children who are 7 and up, there's often a psychological component that we need to look at. So feeding therapy is never just one thing, but it's highly individualized on the child, and it might require psychotherapy, nutrition, and occupational therapy to fix it. The other thing is, depending on the age of the child, giving them control, but controlled choices. Like, would you like peas or carrots tonight?
Yes.
So that they feel that they have a choice, but also it's a healthy choice. I'm not asking you to choose between pirate booties and, goldfish crackers.
Right.
And then, there's, depending on the child, if we're working with autism, if we're working with ADHD, if we're working with a spectrum of things, then in some cases we use ABA. Applied behavioral analysis. We use a reward system. So, you eat this and you get this other thing that you want.
Yeah.
Or, in order for you to earn this game or screen time or that cookie or whatever it is that you want, we work towards that. And how do we work towards that? Instead of doing the chores in the house, like, my kid he helps in the house to earn things that he wants. With my little kids, it's my youngest child, it's literally, you gotta have 3 bites of peas, you gotta try a carrot, and
it's a different currency.
Exactly. So it's every child that will have a highly individualized approach.
We did that in our house. This just came up the other night. I kid you not. And it's a funny story in our family. My daughter, who was really picky when she was younger, I was trying to get her to try a grape. And I said, I will give you this brand new iPad if you just try the grape. And yes, she is as strong-willed as they come. And she said, no, I don't care. The grape is not bad. Yeah. So, and my boys were always like, I will eat the grape, Mom. For the iPad. I will do it.
Funny. Yeah.
That's just one of those epic stories about how strong-willed she has always been about the food.
But hopefully she had other healthy foods that she loved, Sorry.
What's that?
Hopefully she had other healthy foods that she loved,
Oh,
I don't care
she
if
added
you don't
a whole
eat
bunch
grapes,
now.
But yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But you love strawberries, let's go with that,
Yeah, it all remedied. It's all fixed.
Awesome.
You alluded to it earlier that you can correct the gut microbiome. So even if you have a child that is picky,
absolutely,
and then they grow up to be your daughter who is not so picky now and is great, you can correct that. Is that right?
Absolutely. Her microbiome is totally different than what it was because she introduced foods that affect the gut in a certain way. For example, sometimes I use the carnivore diet in my practice with people who have, environmental sensitivities, or people who've tried every sort of elimination diet and nothing worked. The carnivore diet is the elimination diet par excellence. And it's a diet that some people like to stick with. Some people like to use it for a short period of time to eliminate all triggers. And then they reintroduce foods one at a time to figure out what they can tolerate. But one thing that happens as someone starts a full carnivore diet is an extreme change of microbiome.
Right.
And people can have diarrhea for the first few days. Why? Because you're not bringing in the prebiotic foods, and you're not bringing in, I don't know, maybe they ate a lot of grains before, a lot of sugar. So a lot of bacteria that's not being fed dies off, and it gets, eliminated through, diarrhea.
How long does it take to switch your microbiome and make a big impact?
Well, the research says that it's a matter of days.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because a lot of time I'll have people who are like, oh, I'm traveling, I have traveler's diarrhea. And I'm like, okay, do you have traveler's diarrhea, or because you ate something that had a bacteria or food poisoning, or is your microbiome adjusting to your new diet because it's totally different from what you eat at home?
Yeah, that makes sense.
That makes sense.
So, yeah.
And how is the microbiome directly affecting somebody's mental health?
Because of the communication pathways that I described before. So the microbiome produces
my dog was barking.
a lot of, oh no, that's okay. The microbiome produces, it's fundamental for the production of neurotransmitters and hormones. So if we don't have a healthy gut flora, those signaling molecules will not be produced or function optimally. And then also vitamin B12 production, which is necessary for methylation. That also is a big part of it is done by the gut flora. And, methylation is, I promised I wouldn't go technical, but it's the chemical process in the body where a methyl group, which is a molecule, constituted by one carbon atom and 3 hydrogen atoms, is added to another compound or molecule. And it's essential for biochemical reactions. And the key roles of methylation, which is something I wanted to cover anyway, are like gene expression. So epigenetic,
right.
Detox. So a lot of time when I work with certain children, if they're not getting enough B12s, enough Bs, folate 2, they're not detoxifying properly. And then it regulates the synthesis and the function of neurotransmitters, DNA repair, and then energy production. So another thing that happens in children who have imbalanced gut function or restricted diet is that their mitochondrial function, so the powerhouse of their cells, does not function optimally. And when you remove the toxins, when you remove the upstream sources of stress, and you start changing the diet, and you start feeding the microbiome, and you start healing the gut lining, sometimes even, I don't want to say overnight because it's a work that takes time, but you see those switches, and you see a whole different child.
Wow. Can I hit pause really quick? Because you said a couple of things, and I think they obviously translate to you, but they went totally over my head. How does the methylation and that process, how is that related to the mitochondrial function?
Well, so it's basically the metabolism of certain compounds that are necessary for energy production within the cell. So methylation is a process that helps in cell production. You know how it works, right? It's kind of like an engine of a car. You put a fuel in, so food gets broken down into nutrients. The nutrients get into the cell, and they go to feed that ATP production, triphosphate. What's the big word? And then also, as you produce energy, you create toxins, right? Like it says when you burn fuel in your car. And so you need to have healthy cell membranes to allow the nutrients to get into the cell, produce the energy, and also healthy cell membranes are necessary for the exchange of toxic substances from within the cell into the tissues outside the cell so that it can be recycled or carried out of the body, right? And methylation is important for energy production and DNA, repair, epigenetics, all of that.
A lot of people are getting tested for that
HFR. Yes.
Yeah.
So
and that's what you're talking about that's a methylation.
Yeah. And
problem.
I don't even test people. I just advise everyone when they do Bs, if they need to supplement B vitamins, that they do the methylated form. Because do I really need to know that you are homozygote or heterozygote, or you have a gene defect? I honestly start with the assumption that if we have a mitochondrial dysfunction, there is an issue right there, whether it's from an inability of your cell to use the fuels, or whether it is the cell membrane that it's not pliable, that it's not healthy enough to allow things to come in and out, or whether it is a genetic defect. I assume that it's there, and so I just go straight to the methylated B vitamins. I don't need to test you. And then, for me, I mean, are tests necessary? Some people like to know, they like to have a name to whatever it is that they're feeling, and that helps them. And I absolutely support that. But some people will come to me and they're like, I don't have $1,000 for all those
Absolutely.
tests.
All these
I
tests.
cannot
Yeah.
do a stool microbiome test. I cannot
Right.
do a comprehensive digestive analysis. I cannot do genetic testing, especially genetic testing for children that we do for, to check those genes that are related to neurological function, ADD, ADHD, autism. They are expensive. They're $1,400. And
Yeah.
not everybody, some people are like, that's money that can go to groceries. Or,
So you can help
really,
people regardless.
oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, I think it goes back to, from a very basic level, we know that healthy nutrition feeds our body. Why wouldn't it feed our brain?
Well, every
And
cell, exactly. Every cell of the body, brain included, is made out of the food that you eat,
right.
digest, and assimilate.
And I think, when we come, Emmy, you and I talk about this all the time. Why do we see mental health issues on the rise? Well, I think the severe mental health issues that arise are probably from genetics. And there's going to be some things that just need additional support medically using Western medicine techniques. However, I think it also needs to be supported with nutrition. And I think even those, are we seeing an increase in anxiety? Maybe not severe anxiety, because our kids are getting more processed food. They're not getting a balanced diet. And I think this is where this conversation goes, is that yes, we can stop, or we can help prevent the escalation of some mental health issues early on by exposing our kids to a very diverse diet that where we eliminate things like the processed unhealthy food.
I absolutely agree. You couldn't have said it better. Medication saved lives. If I had a heart attack, I want to go to the hospital. I want to get on medication. If I have a severe depression, bipolar disorder, if I'm schizophrenic, I want to take my meds. But I also want to support my body to do what it knows how to do. And,
Absolutely.
nutrition is that's why I'm integrative or functional. When you did my introduction, it's because nutrition is a part of it. It's an extremely important part. We look at hydration, we look at movement, we look at sleep, we look at stress, we look at screen when we work with children, because sleep influences the microbiome. Sleep influences the health of the gut. So it contributes to a balanced or imbalanced gut-brain axis. The same thing is stressors, like stress management. Our primordial brain doesn't know that we're stressed out because of school, because a paper is due, or because there's a saber-toothed tiger chasing us.
Right.
Our fight or flight mechanisms are the same, whether it's something that's silly, quote unquote, or like me as a grown up, I could be like, oh, come on, Liam, my child, that's silly. And I'm like, no, it's not silly. It's for him,
Right.
it's stressful, and I should not downplay that. Well, as a mother to begin with. But anyway, so what do I do with my child? We do deep breaths. We try to mitigate stressors. We do mindfulness. We talk it out. Cosmic Yoga is an amazing YouTube free yoga channel for kids that I really encourage my kids to do often, because when they're stressed out for whatever reason, it really helps them. And then, prioritize sleep. Because did you know children between the age of 3 and 9 require 9 to 12 hours of sleep a day?
Yeah.
You'd be amazed on how many kids come into my practice and they get 5 or 6 hours at best. So what do we look at? We look at, the sleep environment. We look at EMF. We look at my 3 rule is no big meals 3 hours before bed. Dim your lights 2 hours before bed to allow that melatonin production, and no screen time at least an hour before bed. Again, for those circadian rhythms. Also, a lot of time kids that have those circadian rhythms that are not optimally functioning, they wake up first thing in the morning, TV so that, us as grown-ups, we can get in the shower, we can make their lunch, whatever. And they don't need that. What they need is to wake up and be exposed to sunlight. So whether it is have them sit on a balcony, Have them, go walk the dog with your child, or like go play outside if you have a yard, if you're blessed to have an area that they can be exposed to sunlight, not only children, us too, so that we start that daily cycle of, melatonin, we stop melatonin production, and then, we want to foster melatonin production later in the day with reducing the screen, reducing the lights, all that kind of stuff. So it's really a multifaceted approach. And then also, if possible, turn the TV off at mealtime, have that family time, have that moment of connection, but also that moment in which we're focused into eating our food in a parasympathetic state. We're relaxed, we make conversation, we switch from sympathetic dominant to a parasympathetic state, meaning that, our digestive juices flow, our enzymes are produced, we're relaxed, and we can really, be present. That influences digestion so much. I have so many grown-ups that come into my practice and they're like, I suffer from indigestion. The first thing I do is you stop eating in the car, stop getting your food at a window, stop eating while you're working. And it's amazing. 3 days later, they're like, oh my God, this thing works. And I'm like,
wow,
well, of course it works, because you're fostering hormonal production.
So why does that work?
Because digestion begins in the brain. It does not begin in your mouth. It does not begin in your gut. The sight and smell, even the thought of food. Have you ever noticed you walk, I remember walking in France by a boulangerie, you smell the bread, you see those croissants, and my mouth is salivating.
Yeah.
Heck, my dog does that. My dog sees treats coming out of the cupboard and she starts drooling.
Yeah.
That is your brain starting those digestive processes, telling your mouth, produce saliva, because saliva is necessary to digest the beginning of carbohydrate digestion, as well as putting moisture in the food to allow for easier swallowing of the bolus. And then it starts telling you, your pancreas, okay, start making all those enzymes because food is coming. It tells the stomach, okay, you need to start dumping hydrochloric acid to digest protein because food is coming. So digestion begins in the brain. And if your brain is busy doing something else than eating or, smelling or, looking at the food, those processes don't begin.
Yeah, because you're distracted.
Exactly. So your body's doing something else. It's not producing saliva because you're worried about the meeting you have in 20 minutes that you have to prep for.
That's really interesting. That makes sense. That makes sense.
Sorry, am I bringing us out of track?
No, that makes sense.
Well, I don't think it's out of track at all, because today's parents, and even yesterday's, I'm going to consider myself a yesterday parent for young children. We live such busy lives.
I know.
That we are not only cramming food down our own throat, we're cramming food down our kids' throats.
We're 100%. Yeah.
We're feeding them on the way to soccer practice or band practice or whatever. And we're not allowing that whole process to take place. And we're setting them up for those kind of habits as adults.
Absolutely. We are teaching those behaviors.
We have a rule that I try to, I'm not perfect by any means. I'm a work in progress as a working mom who tries to do it all. But when we go out, there's no screen policy. So to keep my 6-year-old from running around the restaurant, I will give him my phone or the iPad until the food gets there. When the food gets there, everything goes away. And I was traveling, and it was interesting to me because there was this French waiter, and he came to me and he was like, those are the only American kids who are not on a screen. And I looked at him and I'm like,
so embarrassing.
But parenting is so hard. And I'm like, I'm trying, but it's hard. And sometimes I wish that I would just break my own rule and be like, okay, have the iPad and eat or whatever. But we use other things, and they're starting to work. My 6-year-old is definitely the difficult eater in my house. So
there's always one.
Yeah, we always need to think about those things that we do to appease the child. And that, it switches their brain into a different state because they're watching a show or they're playing a game, and now they're not focused on their digestion. And the other thing that happens is that we don't register satiety signals
Sure.
as well.
Mhm.
And that's why we have all those people who overeat and they never feel full, because you're clearly, your brain is not there to help you be present and digest your food appropriately. So those signals, of those hormonal signals that should tell you that, okay, your stomach is full, it is stretched to capacity, there, you can't put one more calorie in there or ounce. They just they're not there. And also we need to remember that it takes time, at least 20 minutes for those signals to happen. So people who eat very fast because they have a meeting in 10 minutes, or they're driving and they're doing the drive through, they are not giving their body enough time to receive those signals of satiety.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
So can I assume from this conversation too about the signals and slowing down to eat and everything, that if you rush through eating, that you're not digesting your food properly, thus
Absolutely.
you can then also it may not provide the right balance of probiotic, or I don't know, gut microbiome that could be out of balance as well.
Totally, because food that is maldigested, as it travels through the intestinal tract, it creates more havoc than benefit, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't digest your food for whatever reason, whether it's your brain, whether it's your stomach not producing enough hydrochloric acid, whether it's your pancreas not dumping enough digestive enzyme in your small intestine, food at inappropriate sizes, so food molecules in inappropriate sizes, will stress the intestinal lining, create all sorts of things like leaky gut, maldigestion. The food sits there, it rots, it ferments, it kills the good flora, it causes pathogenic organisms to thrive. And so, you have nutrient deficiencies, maldigestion. Now you can get autoimmunity if you have a leaky gut, because your body starts attacking those particles so the tight junctures of our gut, they get loose,
Right.
because of maldigestion. And now food particles are allowed to go through the gut lining and into the bloodstream at inappropriate sizes.
Oh.
And then your immune system does not recognize that as nutrient. It recognizes it as something foreign that needs to be fought, that it needs to mount an attack on. And that's why we have it's such a high rate of autoimmunity.
Yeah, we hear that
in the Western world. Autoimmunity, obesity, 70% of adults in our country is overweight or obese.
We hear leaky gut a lot.
Yeah, I never knew what leaky gut was.
Yeah.
But now that I guess I never really, let's be honest, I never really took the time to understand what it was. But you explaining it that way, really, it makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah.
And is leaky gut reversible?
Absolutely. You can heal. Every part of the body can be healed unless it's dead, like a necrosis or cirrhosis. Right. Because we renew ourselves daily, depending on the organ. Have you ever noticed how quickly your palate or your lips or your tongue heal after you burn yourself with food? Yes. Yeah. So those are probably the fastest healing cells in the body, because if they took time, you couldn't eat. You'd probably die, right?
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah. Francesca, can you repeat that again? What you said about what could potentially lead to leaky gut?
So maldigested food is one of the big culprits when we develop a leaky gut, because of food that's maldigested. So it gets to the small intestine in inappropriate sizes, because we maybe didn't masticate enough, or we didn't produce enough saliva to masticate, or our stomach is not producing enough hydrochloric acid to break down those proteins. What it does, it sits in our small intestinal lining. It's not digested. So your body doesn't want to move it downstream in the digestive tract, because it's not appropriate for your for the rest of it. It doesn't recognize it as food, right? So it's like you're not ready to go downstream, so you're gonna sit here, and as it sits there, it rots, it ferments.
Wow. And that can contribute to leaky gut.
Well, anything that rots and ferments will release toxins, right? And those toxins destroy the villi and microvilli of the small intestine, causing those tight juncture of the lining to loosen up. And when you have those
Yeah.
big gaps, think about, if you knit a big loose, piece of knitwear, it will allow things to go through, but they're going through at inappropriate sizes. So
And
they're
so then
bigger
that leads,
than your body wants, and that causes the immune system to attack it.
Right.
and so inflammation,
Yeah.
you had mentioned a little earlier, creates a block or a resistance between the brain and the gut. Is that right? Is that what you were saying with the
I
vagus
mean,
nerve?
inflammation can affect every organ of the body. Inflammation in the brain is horrible to deal with because there's such thing as a blood-brain barrier that's supposed to be, isolating the brain from the rest of the body so that we don't die of, toxicity or
Right.
salmonella. But when we have issues with, toxic exposure, and especially exposure to glyphosate, I go back to the glyphosate, we can create a leaky blood-brain barrier. And so the same issue we see in the gut with the leaky gut can happen in the brain. A lot of people, have you ever met someone who has toxicity issue, for example, to mold or
Yes. A lot of young people
the
are getting
brain
that
fog,
diagnosis.
the brain
Yeah.
fog. There's so much issues in the brain because that barrier is not selective anymore. Toxins can get in, or like another big issue is mercury poisoning. You have mercury amalgam fillings. They're so cool. This is 2 centimeters from my brain. Mercury vapors travel to the brain, and so I don't know where I was going, but
Well, can you
so
elaborate on?
You need to detoxify the brain as much as you need to detoxify the body. But then, of course, the brain is so sensitive that you need to have a strong foundation. You need to detox the easiest to get to toxins from tissues before you can do the brain.
Mm-hmm. Francesca, if somebody were coming to you and they had their overwhelming symptom are mental health symptoms, anxiety or depression, where do you start and how do you approach someone's healing through your practice and expertise?
Well, start with the diet. I want to bring in the good food that allows you to make good neurotransmitters and hormones. But I need to make sure you're digesting this good diet. So it's not just diet. I look at your digestive system. Is it functioning? Or do we need to fix that? Hydration. Are you hydrated enough to shuttle those nutrients throughout your body and get the toxins out? Your bowels, are they moving, allowing toxins to leave the body? Because toxins are endemic. Like we produce toxins in our cells as a byproduct of energy production. So a lot of time I talk about toxins and people think about, oh, I'm not exposed to anything. I live in the countryside, or, whatever it is. And I'm like, well, we do have endogenous toxins that we produce that we need to clean house, get out of the body. So I look at everything. Of course, it all starts with food and digestion, nutrient balance. Depending on the age, sometimes you need to add good foods in before you can remove bad foods from the diet, even though, resistance.
So it's more from a
psychological.
child. Okay.
Well, it's so funny. I actually find children easier to work with, especially young children, because they have no preconceived notion. And a lot of time, unless I'm working with a picky eater, a lot of time it's more the parents who are like, oh, how's my kid going to survive without pancakes and, syrup at breakfast? Yeah. And I'm like, they will, it's you, the guilt, but you can't feel guilty if you're helping your child's body thrive, or we can work on that. I mean, anyway. So absolutely, the foundation of digestion and food are number one, but also you need to figure out what the upstream sources of toxicity are, because if there's exposure to something that's making this child sick, I see mold so much. I see kids who are and I want to talk about it for a sec, is kids who are sensitive to EMFs, or kids who are sensitive to, maybe they live on a golf course or they spray their yard with pesticides. And people will be like, yeah, but my other child does not react. Yes,
Right.
but we all have a bucket. Think about it this way. We all have a bucket in which we store our toxins. And how full our bucket is depends on a lot of things. Exposure is one of them, but also the rate at which our body detoxifies is another one, right? So you might have a child who does not have methylation issues and has plenty of good B vitamins in the diet, who is regularly and optimally emptying this toxic load, this bucket, so that drop of pesticide exposure or mold exposure does not make them sick. Then you have those other children or people grown up whose toxic bucket is so full because there's methylation issue, because they're buying microbiome imbalance, because the diet is less than optimal, full of processed foods. Their bucket is so full that one drop of toxin will make it, go overboard and will cause sickness. So a lot of time they'll be like, oh, I got my wisdom teeth out and I got sick. Well, your bucket was already full to begin with. So yes, we need to fix maybe the cavitation, maybe a lot of time infected teeth are removed, but the infection stays in the jaw. So we need to work with a good dentist to make sure that is gone. But also, what are the other sources that have filled your bucket so much? What is it? Is it your genes, your methylation that we need to fix? Is it, your exposure to mold? So you need to remediate mold in a house or move to a different house. Or, it's never a one thing. Unfortunately, oftentimes when we work with chronic conditions, it's like peeling an onion layer after stinky layer after stinky layer,
But onions taste good.
There
even
you go.
if they stink.
It's the same thing with
And she said it's a
lime.
prebiotic.
I know.
see-
Quit
What?
downing on the onion.
I see it's a prebiotic. Yeah, I see it with Lyme a lot. Why do you have two people who have Lyme disease and one responds beautifully through therapy and the Lyme is gone and the other one, no, and it goes into all sorts of tissues, or the long hauler COVID too. Like, why in one person this virus is able to stick and stay and in another one it didn't? Well, because their system is probably overloaded with toxins or, stressed out, or there's something there that's perpetrating that infection. Or,
So how do you empty the bucket?
well, you support the organs of detox, you support methylation, you support mitochondrial function through energy production, and then you start working on removing the stressors.
So
Can you
basically
explain
nutrition.
that?
So
Yeah.
basically diet, digestion, supplements as appropriate for that person, and then you remove the sources of stress.
So this may be a rhetorical question. And maybe it's because we grew up in Phoenix, Emmy, where it was deathly hot and it was deathly dry. But I didn't hear about anybody having mold issues.
Or Lyme.
I knew you were.
Or severe mental health.
I mean,
Right. What's happening?
Lyme, it's a tick bite. So you need to have the deer that hosts that specific tick. So there's definitely parts of the world or country that don't have Lyme disease because they don't have that tick. Mold, though mold is not associated with climate per se, because you can have a leak in your house caused by a pipe, and you can live in Arizona and you still have mold in your house. Remember, mold needs water to start and grow, but it doesn't need water to stay. So you may have a leak. Even the issue with mold is that it's, even if it's not visible, it doesn't mean that it's not there.
Yeah. So the question I think I come back to is
why so much?
Why are we seeing it so much more now?
Well, I think because our buckets are just
That's
so
what
full.
I was that's where I was leading to.
Yeah. So I actually,
which means more toxin exposure.
Yes.
Crappier food and diets.
Lower ability for the body to detoxify, which causes an accumulation of toxins, which then there will be the straw on the camel's back that will make your body go boom.
Well, why do people have a lower ability? What does that mean?
it's stress, it's the food, it's not optimal, it's the microbiome that it's not optimal, cell function. I mean, we go back to, we don't need healthy fats that make healthy cell membranes. So we have crappy cells that don't allow nutrients in, don't allow toxins out. So now your energy production is lower. Think about, you got a diesel and you put a different type of fuel in the car. You put hydrogen in the
Oh, that's
car.
a good
The car is
analogy.
not going to be able to start, because the
Yeah.
fuel is not optimal. Or like, you have your engine needs to be cleaned out. You need your filter, your oil filter to be changed, but we never do it in
Mhm.
the body. So we tend to take more care of our cars than we take care of our bodies. And
Okay,
we're exposed to so many more environmental toxins than we've ever been exposed before. Air pollution, pesticide residues, herbicides, water sources that are contaminated. I mean, we live in a toxic world, which wasn't the case 70 years ago. And that's
Really?
probably our grandparents could get away with smoking until they were 100 years old. Because the tobacco was well, first of all, was natural. It wasn't full of chemicals and nasty stuff. It was probably a cleaner tobacco anyway, because it wasn't sprayed with all sorts of pesticides. And then they had good food that provided them with all sorts of micronutrients to offset the free radicals caused by smoking. I am by no means telling you to go smoke. Absolutely. But I'm saying why we have those, everybody has a family member, at least everybody my generation has that aunt that lived to be 105, and she
Yeah.
smoked all her life.
Right.
And she was healthy all her life. And why? Well, doesn't smoke affect everyone? Yes, but she probably had a very optimal diet detox mechanisms, and she got away with that onslaught. But now it's, we're exposed to so much.
So that brings up kind of a good point in why we're also seeing younger children being diagnosed or seeing signs of mental health struggles, whether it be anxiety, depression, autism, ADHD, is that it is a more toxic world. I also,
and it starts in utero.
Right. And I also wonder, are things building up generation over generation over generation?
Absolutely.
So, 100 years ago, our ancestors were eating a fairly clean diet. They didn't have processed foods, really, very few. And then it's just gotten increasingly more prevalent to eat the junk food, to eat the easy food. And I mean, our generation, especially Emmy, we were the generation of McDonald's and Taco Bell. That was all new
I know,
out
that's
there.
what I was going to say. Yeah, it's hard for me to wrap my brain around this is much more toxic world, because we also didn't grow up with organic foods. And
right, but also
healthy,
we're
clean
not exposed to the
products.
type of pesticides or GMO crops that we're exposed now. It was not organic, but the soil was not as depleted. The chemicals used were not as horrible as now. And it's not that we are just doing GMO crops so that they're resistant to pests. Did you know that we make GMO potatoes so that they don't look bruised or brown?
Wow.
I mean, that is just why.
And I don't think
vanity and potatoes.
Why am I changing the DNA of freaking potatoes,
which is ugly anyways?
brown?
Let's get real. But I'm not talking about.
And yes, transgenerational effect, absolutely. So when we do studies, especially in animal model, and we do toxic exposure in utero for BPAs or glyphosates, that we see the repercussions of that maternal fetal exposure 3-4 generations after that.
Oh, wow.
The same
That's
thing
what
when we
I'm
look at
talking about. I'm
nutrition.
not talking about 10 years, 20 years ago. I'm talking about 100 years ago.
Totally. So
your
grandma system was stronger because of genetics. But with each generation, we get weaker. And this is something that's been known for 100 years at least. And it started with Pottinger's cats. Dr. Pottinger, Francis Pottinger, did this experiment experiment. He actually he run a sanitarium, and they were cats, roaming around. And he was like, they would eat scraps, or they would eat, whatever it was. And they started doing experiments on the cats, and seeing how 2, 3, 4 generations of cats into a different diet would create a totally different animal. So the cats that were fed, I cannot remember exactly, but like processed foods, were infertile by generation 2. They were, they exhibited what would be comparable to mental health issues in humans, versus cats that were fed raw meat, raw milk. And not only that, but it took several generations of feeding the cats the right diet to reverse all the damage that had been done.
Oh, that is
Started in the first
compelling.
generation, absolutely. So, if we work towards healing our children and giving them the foundations of health, we're not just helping our kids, but we're helping our grandchildren and great grandchildren. Granted that they follow through with what we teach them and what should be. But the state of our health, or the lack of their alpha, is such a huge burden for society, not just for the individual and a family. I mean, it's heartbreaking and heart-wrenching, but it's costing productivity loss, hospital bills. I mean, you name it. It's like just not sustainable when you look at the rates of health and diseases in this country, and how they're exponentially growing year after year after year.
Yeah. Well, thinking about a negative compounding effect on our kids' nutrition that we participate in and our parents participated in, that's a little overwhelming. So, but it is also reassuring that we know we have the knowledge and we have the ability to make a positive change.
Absolutely.
And see it in our own lifetime.
Yes, absolutely. You can, epigenetics works both ways, right? You cannot just negatively impact your epigenetic expression through environmental factors. You can also positively impact it and keep it that way. And that's the same, why some women have the BRCA gene, but they don't develop cancer. That's how the environmental factors keep those genes turned off, right? Having a gene is not seen as a death sentence anymore. Of course, you want to do screening, you want to keep, monitoring. Some people opt for a mastectomy preventatively. That everyone needs to be supported into making the best decisions for them. But we also need to teach those women that it's not a death sentence, because there's so much in their power that they can do to keep those genes off, turned off.
One of the goals, because we're at a little over an hour just on this recording, but one of the goals of This Way Up is to provide hope for parents.
Absolutely.
And after today's conversation with you, even though we have got this world that we're living in today that is full of toxins, that has increased a rise in mental health and such, I'm hearing 3 major things. We can reverse the damage that's being done.
Yes.
And the way we're reversing it is introduce a variety of foods to our kids, healthy foods to the kids, and also very basic, slow down and allow yourself to eat, which will then allow your body to digest properly.
Absolutely. Feed your microbiome with probiotics and prebiotics, create those healthy cell membranes with good, healthy fats. Limit processed foods, limit the sugars, limit the additives, limit the coloring, ensure hydration, because we need water, for everything to circulate and function. And be mindful. And then, control what is controllable. You cannot change your DNA, but you can change the expression. And what can you control? Your food, your environment. You can control how you react to stress. And the stresses don't go away, but the way you train yourself to react to them is impactful. And, I wouldn't go so much in detail when I don't go so much in detail when I work with my clients, unless they
Sure.
want to know, of course, they want the education piece. But, what I want them to have is actionable steps. Reduce your exposure to pesticides, reduce your exposure to, GMOs, and make sure the quality of your food is great. Eliminate or highly reduce. And here's the thing: when I work with children, I don't want a food to be labeled as good or bad, but I do have kids who come back to me and they were like, I know how that candy bar affects me because I don't need it anymore, and I ate it at a birthday party and it made me crazy. That I literally had a child who used that word the other day. Like,
Wow.
It made my brain crazy. This is a 5-year-old.
Wow.
Made my brain crazy. And I was like, I am so glad that you are able to get those signals, that before they were muffled because you were eating it every day. You weren't just not feeling good, but you didn't know why. Now you can pinpoint that it was that thing. And, there's healthier treats. There's the natural candy store. It's an amazing resource. Easter's coming up. People can buy, better quality chocolate eggs that don't have corn syrup, they don't have coloring, they're like, nature
Natural
intended.
candy store.
I've already written that down.
Naturalcandystore.com.
Show me the way.
And then I'm not telling you you cannot ever have cake or a treat. In my house, we bake a lot. My kids love baking, but we get the best ingredient. I always got the sugar enough than what the recipe is calling for. And I try to make it the best treat. Also, it's a treat. So they know that the bulk of their food is what we call in my house growing food. And then they have a little bit of wiggle room for what I call fun food.
That's great.
Food and growing food.
Yes. And they know the difference. They know they need the majority of the food to be growing food. And that fun food is not also every day. Like, this is very cultural. I never grew up with dessert every night after dinner. Ever. We had dessert on Sunday after church. We'd have the big Sunday meal in my family, and then we had dessert. That was it. Or a birthday party, or,
Right.
But it wasn't dessert every day. So this is very cultural. And sometimes the resistance comes from the parents and not the children.
That's true. That's
I
true.
grew up with ding dongs in the refrigerator at all times.
I don't know
I
what
grew
a
up with a
ding
lot
dong
of sugar.
is.
Yeah. Ding dong. Oh my God.
What's a ding dong? Oh my
A
God.
ding dong, if you
It's the
taste it,
immigrant in me talking. What's a ding
it is a packaged, fully enclosed cupcake, like covered in chocolate, dipped in chocolate. And it tasted really good back then, not so good today.
Right.
Oh, that sounds awful.
It's so it's so chemical tasting.
Yeah. And then I can tell the chemicals.
Oh,
Like, I don't eat
SpaghettiOs. Holy
I've never.
moly!
Yeah, God bless. Yeah,
Francesca, where can people find you?
On my website is healthfullivingsd.com.
SD.
Okay.
San Diego.
San Diego. I know, because it was already taken. And anyway, for another podcast, they can find me on social media. The same thing. It's Healthful Living SD, or you can Google my name, Francesca Orlando Nutrition, and I'll pop up.
We'll have that all in the notes as well.
People all over the country, and actually I have clients a little bit all over the world. So,
that's great. So you can work with people remotely.
Absolutely. Yeah. Zoom,
Fantastic.
Skype.
That's great.
We have all those tools now. I was remote before remote was a thing. So, yeah.
That's
Francesca,
great. I've learned
thank
so
you.
much.
Yeah, thank you for reminding us at the end of the day to focus on the things that we can control.